Hello everyone, hopefully you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting in just a second. Have a bit of a shorter episode this, although every time I say it's going to be a short episode, it never ends up being a short episode. So we'll try and keep it short. There's not much to talk about this week, so if it's longer than an hour, I will be surprised. I should probably unmute you. There you go. You should be able to hear Dan now.
Blah, 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 blah. My tweet is sent. I can now edit my tweets, which is awesome.
So can I, even though it's not available in the UK?
How did that happen?
Just VPN. Because the...
Oh, it's like a US thing?
Yeah, Twitter Blue is only available in like 4 markets, and the UK isn't one of them. But if you once you subscribe, it sticks. So just VPN for 2 minutes.
I forgot my water.
Man, I am so ready for the weekend. It's not even funny.
Okay, I think I am just about ready now. Let's get this right up. Zach is recording me, so says Skype. All right, I am now recording.
I am recording as well.
3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 287 for October 7th, 2022. All right, this is the Windows Central Podcast with me and Zach Bowden, and no Jez Corden anymore, as he'll appear once in a while, but he's probably off napping somewhere, but he's a very busy man. Too busy for us, so apologies for that, but that's his call. This week, we got a lot to talk about. Actually, not a lot. It was a pretty slow week, but this is the calm before the storm, as they say. There's a lot of stuff coming next week. First up will be Windows 11 news, of course, and then we'll talk about Android 12L and the status of Surface Duo 1 and 2. Mostly a recap if you've been listening to this podcast previously. Early Windows 8 concepts came out. Zach will talk about that, what those were all about. Acer made the lightest 16-inch OLED laptop, which is that's a pretty specific world record. I think because of the OLED part. But I have it here, actually, and it's pretty interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about that and maybe why you would be interested in it, as well as the new microphone I'm on, which was released by HyperX this week, called the Procast. So if my voice sounds nice and deep and sultry and rich, that would be why. And we'll explain about that microphone for those of you who are looking for an upgrade. We'll do a review roundup and a thing of the week. And my doggy just walked in the room wanting attention, of course, but that's okay. Zach, how are you doing this week?
I am not too bad. I have been quite busy this week for reasons you shall see next week. But yeah, I am. I'm ready for the weekend. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always ready for the weekend as is. But yeah, obviously what Zach is alluding to is next week's no secret, October 12th on Wednesday. Microsoft is hosting its Surface event, which it does every single year. And we've been, teasing and talking about stuff for a few weeks now. If you haven't listened to last week's podcast, we actually went over pretty much everything we heard. And so, yeah, it's going to be a fun, busy week. There's also other announcements coming next week. A lot of companies are announcing either new products, accessories, and all that kind of jazz. Really interesting stuff. But yeah, I guess let's get to the Windows 11 news and what happened there this week.
Yep, so dev channel and release preview channels builds this week. We'll start with the dev channel build. Nothing too major here, as is often the case with insider builds these days. But they have released a new build 25217, that introduces support for third-party widgets. So developers can install this build and using the WinApp SDK 1.2 Preview 2 or above can begin building third-party widgets which can show up in the Windows 11 widgets panel. So that's finally beginning to sort of come together now. Microsoft did announce earlier this year that would be a thing towards the end of this year, and now developers are being invited to start building those widgets for users. And those widgets will be discoverable in the Microsoft Store, as far as I'm aware. They will also be bundled with programs you install, packaged Win32 apps, as well as PWAs. They don't mention UWP, which I'm guessing means UWP doesn't support widgets, but everything else should support them, which is pretty cool. So yeah, look forward to that. Hopefully some developers add support for widgets. I'd like to see maybe Spotify or Slack or anything really. Let's be honest.
Twitter.
Twitter would be kind of cool. It would be really cool actually. Yeah. And then basically just fixes. They are also testing. This is a weird one. They announced this as a sneak peek, but I've no idea why they announced it. So, but essentially they're testing a slightly updated UI for the Teams chat flyout. So if you click on it, some insiders will see a preview of your webcam now, rather than just a list of chats. So that's pretty cool. Again, that's something that they say is going to roll out more broadly in the coming months. But as of right now, a few people should see.
Breaking news!
Do you have it?
That still exists.
The chat, yeah, Teams chat does still exist, yeah. Slowly being updated with stuff, but I don't think anyone's using it still, so there you are. And they've also updated the Microsoft Store so that it should now clearly show when a game is available on Game Pass. So that's that for the dev channel. The release preview channel is a little bit more interesting, kind of. It's not the contents of the build, but just rather the fact that this build is now in the release preview channel. But if you are in the release preview channel, you will now be getting the contents of the first Windows 11 22H2 feature drop, also known as Moment 1 internally. This update will include things like tabs in File Explorer, suggested actions, a new taskbar overflow menu, and a more expanded and enhanced discover and share menu and whatnot. So that is finally in the release preview channel, which makes sense. Microsoft did say that this would begin running out in October to everybody. So now it's in the release preview channel, so Microsoft can begin testing it as if those final bits for the public. So if you are in the release preview ring, you may not see them straight away. Microsoft does say this, even though the build will get installed, it can take a couple of days for the features to actually flip on for you. But yeah, so that's a big deal as well. So Moment 1 is done and is now in testing. The last sort of stages of testing before it rolls out to the public. And that's pretty much everything for Windows 11 this week. Really not much to report. Pretty slow week for Windows 11, which makes sense. We are a week away from a big Surface event. So not too much to talk about for Windows 11 this week.
Well, that's sad, but I guess not all too surprising, as you alluded to, because of next week and what's happening there. So I guess speaking of, we'll segue into Android 12L and the status of the Duo 1 and Duo 2. You wrote an article this week that kind of basically summarized things you've been saying on the podcast now for quite a few weeks, but you're very confident in this stuff now. So why don't you recap what we're expecting with 12L? And more importantly, I guess, when we expect 12L.
So regarding when, I know there were a few people who were sort of hoping that maybe it would begin rolling out on Wednesday next week when the Surface event takes place. As far as I'm aware, that is not happening. The update will be coming later. It'll be late October or early November, most likely. I believe they've got a candidate for a final build now, but it takes at least 2 weeks for them to sort of validate that and ensure it's good enough. And then they need to submit to Google. So yeah, it takes a little while to get a final build ready for the public. So yeah, I would be very shocked if it rolls out next Wednesday. Regarding whether or not they would talk about it next Wednesday, I'm not confident that's going to happen. I think they're just going to focus on Windows devices next week. Could be wrong about that, but I don't think that's going to happen, sadly. So yeah, regarding the actual contents of Android 12L, again, this is basically a lot of recapping of what I've talked about on the podcast throughout a number of episodes. But if you've missed those, the TLDR is Android 12L for Surface Duo will introduce an updated design for the first time on Surface Duo devices. Previous versions of Android 10 and Android 11 for Surface Duo very much was stock Android. They were using Google's Material Design language. They really didn't do much to the OS to sort of make it look like a Microsoft product. With Android 12L, I hear that's changing. So instead of Material Design language, you should expect to see more fluent design language elements here and there. For example, I've been told that the notification shade, for example, the quick actions in there on Android now resembles that of the quick settings panel on Windows 11. So that, you've got the colored boxes and stuff, and you can click into them and see more information and whatnot, which is really nice. Also blur effects, so when you pull the notification shade down, there'll be a nice blurred panel behind it, which is pretty cool. Lots of blurred effects elsewhere as well. So if you swipe up and hold to open the multitasking switcher, there'll be blurred effects there. If you open up the settings app, for example, the lots of the icons in there have been updated to match the Windows 11 iconography, which is really nice. The Microsoft launcher is getting a minor update to sort of in the activity feed. The UI should look a little bit like the notification boxes on Windows 11. More small stuff like that, but altogether comes to sort of give the UI a significant refresh, if you will. It's not radically changing in UX, like it'll be still a familiar Android experience. Just how it looks in certain areas will be more Windows-like and less Google material, which I'm a big fan of. I'm really sort of glad Microsoft is finally applying its own design language to its products, because it is a Microsoft product at the end of the day. It should represent the Microsoft design language. I'm also hearing there's a new pen menu feature coming. So currently on Surface Duo right now, you can configure the different pens to do things, but there's no dedicated sort of pen launcher that you can configure it to access. With Android 12L, there will be. So by default, tapping the top button, for example, will pull up essentially a quick launcher for different apps on your phone. And you can configure that to show a bunch of apps that support pen or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Same with Windows 11's pen menu. You can configure that to launch whichever app you want. Except on Android, it will also show you your battery, your pen's battery, which is a nice touch. And then the last sort of big sort of change or big feature I'm hearing is coming, though I don't think it will be there at launch, is a feature called Duo Connect, which is an enterprise feature that will allow Surface Duo users to dock up to a larger screen, similar to Continuum, punch in credentials for a cloud PC based on Windows 365, and then use Windows through a remote desktop connection on their Surface Duo using the larger screen. So that's a cool idea. Basically, a cloud-based version of Continuum, which is supposed to be coming to Surface Duo at some point on top of 12L. So those are the sort of, that's the almost TLDR, the short version of what to expect. Of course, there will be more bug fixes and hopefully battery life improvements, camera optimizations, and all the other sort of stuff you should expect with a new version of Android. As well as all the stock Android stuff. So the ability to set an accent color based on your wallpaper is coming with Android 12L. A lot of the privacy and conversation and notification improvements are coming with Android 12L as well. So all of that to look forward to, in addition to all of the Microsoft goodness on top. And yeah, it's shaping up to be a really big release. It is. I think it will be a shame if Microsoft doesn't talk about this release at least a little bit at the event, because I think it's worthy of it. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see about that. Dan, what are your thoughts on Android 12L?
Well, first, someone's asking, why is it not getting the Android 12L taskbar? Right. Which I don't get why people want that taskbar. Like, that's my first question. Yeah. But a lot of it has to do with Microsoft Launcher and just the way Microsoft does things. But I don't see the advantage of what that taskbar would bring to Duo.
The taskbar on Android 12L is designed for large screens, for tablet-sized screens. People seem to think the Duo is a tablet when it really isn't. The Duo is a phone with two phone screens. So that's why you don't see the taskbar on a Pixel or a Samsung S22, for example, because it's a phone-sized screen. It's unnecessary. The Duo just adds a second one, so you've just now got two phone-sized screens, and it's still unnecessary because it doesn't make sense for that. It only makes sense on tablet-sized screens. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. Plus, you've always got the dock and the home screen always running. If you open an app on one screen, that dock and stuff is still there on the other screen. You just need to tap on it to launch the second app, and there you are. So it's not that Microsoft couldn't bring it to Microsoft Launcher. They very much could if they wanted to. It's just that for this form factor, for the dual screen form factor, it doesn't make sense. It's not for this form factor. Android 12L isn't just for dual screen phones. It's for foldable devices and tablets as well. And that's what the taskbar is for. Duo doesn't need the taskbar for it to be able to multitask, because that's all built natively into the hardware. So that's why it's not there.
Lots of weird comments going on here. I heard Surface Duo, was it the firmware is Windows? That comment doesn't even make sense. Windows is not a firmware, for one. It's an operating system.
Surface Duo uses UEFI, which is typically a Windows thing, but but it's a Surface, so it makes sense. That means companies can manage it through UEFI and stuff. Additionally, Surface Duo was a Windows device at one point internally, and I'm sure they recycled a number of that sort of early upbring work for the version with Android, but it's not a Windows device running Android on top. It's an Android device through and through. So don't get confused with that.
And then we're not expecting other features as well. So, people are asking about, can you change the icons yet? And no, that doesn't seem to be a thing. We still don't know any plans for Microsoft Launcher, what's coming down the road, if they have any plans. For me, it's not a make or break thing. I've had Android devices. I bought icon packs in the past. I do that every once in a while. It's fun. That said, like, I don't look at my Duo when I turn it on and just like cringe at the icons. They're actually really nice icons. And I get what Microsoft's going for. It's sort of like the Apple approach where they design the experience and want to guarantee it. I will say one interesting thing I've been noticing on YouTube is, and if you search for Surface Duo or Surface Duo 2, a lot of videos have been popping up with people revisiting the device. I saw 2 just last night from just normal people. Some of them are also like kind of YouTubers who cover tech, who are picking up the device again. And like someone was doing the Surface Duo and they're just saying how it's like night and day difference between the way it is now versus a year ago or when it first came out, especially. Basically, the performance is just way better and it's faster and it's bug-free. And this, of course, applies for Duo 2. And speaking of Jez Corden, he was a defender of the Fold 3. He had the Fold 3 for a long time. And then he bought the Surface Duo 2 when it first came out, like the first month he got it. And that was obviously a rough month, right? Even our review gave it, I think it was 3.5 or 4 stars. I think it was 3.5 out of 5, but it wasn't great. It was saying, yeah, things are way better. There's a lot more potential here, but they still have some issues that need to be fixed. And that's when he had it. And he wrote an article about how he didn't like it. He had bugs and issues. And so he sent it back, and he's been on the Fold 3, and he's been on like a Fold supporter for a long time. He just liked the experience until the screen started to break on him. And it wasn't from dropping. It was just from usage. First, he had some dead pixels, and then I think some of it cracked or something like that. And then he ran into issues with Samsung's customer support, where he is in Germany, being kind of rough, and it was just out of warranty and all this kind of stuff. So then he was going to get a Galaxy S22, but he managed to, we kind of convinced him to try a Surface Duo 2, and actually Microsoft sent him one, so fair is fair here. But the question was, is he going to remain on it? What's he think now? And so far, he's been very positive about it. He does have some battery drain issues, which are kind of odd, that Zach and I don't have. But he was commenting internally to us about how, he thinks the camera on the Duo 2 kind of blows away, he says, the Fold 3s, especially in low light performance, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, the Duo's cameras, the Duo 2's cameras, I should say, are on par, if not better, than what the iPhone 12 was, because I had the iPhone 12 mini, which has the same cameras as the iPhone 12, and it's a good camera, but the Duo 2 actually does it sharper. In fact, I would even go to say the Duo 2's camera sometimes is better than the iPhone 13's camera. I haven't tried the 14, obviously, but what I meant was I was shocked, and I was going to tweet about this, about how the iPhone 13, at least my mini, which has the same cameras as the 13, is terrible at macro shots. Like, you get within a couple inches and it's just like it can't focus anymore. I was trying to take a picture of my watch, as one does, which I'll explain later. And I couldn't do it on the iPhone. I had to hold it out kind of far and then take the photo, and I would have to crop it in, which obviously defeats the purpose. Where I picked up Duo 2 and I was able to just get right in there, take a close-up shot, nice and sharp and everything. But he's having a very positive experience with it. There's, like I said, a lot of YouTubers are revisiting this, and I encourage people to go on YouTube and just search for what other real people are saying about these devices and how much they've improved. And I think it's just it's a feather in a cap for Microsoft, who really turned things around with this. And that team clearly is doing a lot of good optimizations. Jez even pointed out to us, he thinks it feels faster than the Fold 3. Now, I know the Fold 4 is out, so it's not a completely fair comparison. But he's like, what's the processor in this? And I told him it's the same one, a Snapdragon 888 as the Fold 3. It's just that I guess Microsoft has just really optimized things to make it fast and responsive. Now, of course, Fold 4, which I have used, is very fast. It's faster. It has the Gen 1 processor. So kudos to Samsung,
He's-
obviously there.
He's probably reacting to the fact that the screens are 90 hertz, because I know the Fold 3 has 120 hertz, but he turns that off. He sets it to 60. So technically, he's upgraded from a 60 hertz display to 90, which is a jump. It is certainly a noticeable jump from 60 to 90.
Yeah.
Less so from 90 to 120, but that can just make things feel fast and smooth just on its own. So maybe that's what he's referring to when he says it seems faster, which is great.
Yeah. Sarah is asking, since my question is going to be ignored, even though I'm reading it right now, are the screenshots available where I can see the Surface Duo 2 OS design? So we're talking about the 12L stuff. No, we do not have screenshots.
We can't publish screenshots. But I'm sure you'll see it in the next few weeks when it begins rolling out. And we'll be sure to have a hands-on video of it when it does begin rolling out as well.
This one video that the guy was talking about, Surface Duo 2, it was his main device, and I guess he was on vacation with some friends, and his friend tried it and basically asked him, he's like, can I have this? and he eventually ended up selling him the phone, which was interesting. But perhaps more interesting is the guy he sold it to is an iPhone user. And he said the rest of the trip he was on this thing all the time because he's what he calls a high productivity user, which is exactly what a user for Surface Duo 2 should be, high productivity. He's using Excel, he's using Office, PowerPoint, and he's copying stuff back and forth. And he said he was all over this device. He still does carry an iPhone, of course, but not because it's like an inherently better phone, but because of the iMessage system that people are still hooked on. And obviously, I would imagine if he has a newer iPhone, the camera would be better, especially for video, if you do that a lot. So it's hard to break away from iOS, which is exactly what Apple wants. But it's a really interesting story of how some people pick up this device and immediately it clicks for them why it makes sense, while I think others who are watching this story unfold from afar, pardon the pun, don't really understand it and still think it's like just a fold copy, and people are like, oh, Samsung's going to beat them. It's like, it's not the same race, but that's okay.
So a few people asking, will the Duo 1 be getting it at the same time as the Duo 2? As far as I'm aware, the answer is yes. I believe they will roll out at the same time, or roughly the same time. There won't be like a month difference between them. If it's not on the same day, it'll be a couple of days later. But the plan is to sort of roll them out around the same time. So if you're a Duo 1 user, you will be getting most of those updates. Well, actually, I think you'll be getting all of them. I don't think there's any update there that's specific to Duo 2 hardware, other than maybe camera optimizations, which will be specific to Duo 2. But everything else, all the features, the UI stuff, should be coming to Duo 1 as well. So if you bought a Duo 1 for $300, that's a pretty good deal, because I think you're destined for 12L, and I think you're also destined for the next major release as well. I think, am I wrong about that? Maybe I'm wrong about that. I can't remember.
Came out in 2020, so should 2023.
Android, yeah, right. So they should get one more release. Now, what the question, of course, now I don't have the answer to this yet, is what will be after 12L? Are they going to move to Android 13, or are they going to wait and jump to Android 14? Because Android 14 comes out next, I guess, August. I don't know the answer to that. If I had to guess, I think maybe they would wait for Android 14. But I don't know if that's actually if that is the case. The only reason I say that is because if they're going to do a Duo 3 or the next Duo or the next foldable phone next fall,
they're going to want to launch it.
Yeah, want to launch it of the latest version of Android, at least try to. So maybe they will start working on that. And again, now that, for those who don't know, the Duo 1 and Duo 2 are basically running the same build now, so they can, instead of maintaining two separate sort of versions for each device, it's one universal version that they sort of specify for each device, so it's easy for them to build now, and that will likely apply to the next version as well, so they can back report things and stuff, and it should be easy to maintain all three. But again, we'll have to wait and see regarding what happens there, but we'll have to see what happens to the original Surface Duo, whether it gets Android 14 or Android 13.
And as usual, we got to add the caveat: if we're all still around in 2023.
Unless everything explodes and we all die. But hopefully that doesn't happen, and we do get to see the next Surface Android phone.
Surface 203. That's the only thing we're living for right now. Is just waiting for that. That's fair. Yeah. Someone's asking an interesting question, which is the Surface Duo original one sometimes can be bought for $300 to $350 brand new on Amazon. That happened this week or late last week, I believe. It's a tough question to answer. Obviously, some people just have 300 or $350 sitting around, and they don't
Yeah.
mind. Uh, I would say if you're like a tech person and you're interested in this and you like kind of living on the edge, yeah, it's totally worth it. A lot of people are buying it, using it as a secondary device, but I guess there's no reason why you couldn't switch to it as your primary device. It performs very well. The reason some people wouldn't switch to it as their primary device is that it's missing things like NFC. It only has one camera, which is fine for outdoor usage, but it doesn't have ultra wide zoom. It doesn't have, or ultra wide. It doesn't have zoom. It doesn't have low light performance as good as the one in Duo 2. I forgot. Does Duo 1 even have 5G, or is it
No,
just 4G?
it's 4G.
Yeah, it's just 4G. Yeah, so of course I don't think that matters personally. In fact, I turn off 5G on my phones because it's just kind of worthless. And the consensus seems to be it uses more battery life, whether it's on iOS or Android. So I don't think that's a deal breaker. But yeah, I mean, if you can afford it and you're not going to go into debt, or severely at least, I would absolutely say pick it up. Use it as a secondary device, maybe throw a SIM in there for a while too and just see how it is. But the Duo 1 is still very attractive because of how thin it is, and without that camera bump, it's really cool.
It is
But
unlike
as
anything else.
yeah, and if you have a pen with it for note taking, the performance is like astonishingly good. And we've said this before in this podcast where I know I personally thought about switching back to the Duo 1 for a
Yeah,
little
me
while
too.
because the performance is so good on it. But then, the little things like the camera and NFC
Yeah.
would bug me because now I'm starting to use NFC. So that's an issue.
Yeah. So the other thing I kind of want to sort of highlight, I guess, is with these changes coming with Android 12L, I think it's the first time we're really seeing that sort of ecosystem idea come to life for Surface. Because up until now, Microsoft has only released PCs. They have the Surface Studio, which is the desktop. They have the laptops. They have the tablets, and then they've had the Surface Duo with Android up until now. But it's very much been it looks and feels like Android. There's not much connectivity between them. There's no consistency. There's no coherency between them. With the 12-hour release, that for the first time, I think, isn't going to be the case, where the software looks like a Microsoft product in addition to the hardware being a Microsoft product. And, Google just did its event this week, and they made a big deal about ecosystem. They announced new phones, they announced a watch, they announced a new tablet. Weirdly, Google has everything except the PCs, whereas Microsoft has everything at this point except the watch. So arguably, I think Microsoft is in a better position to do this whole ecosystem thing compared to Google, who doesn't have that desktop operating system, which is kind of vital for creatives and professionals of any caliber. Samsung, of course, Apple is the king at this. Apple has the complete ecosystem experience already. That's what everybody else wants to be able to achieve, and all the other companies are trying their best to get there. Samsung, I think, is the second closest because they have all of the form factors. The problem with Samsung is that their ecosystem is spread across a whole bunch of different platforms, and none of them they own. Like, it's all other people's platforms, so they have to sort of strong arm all the different platforms into doing what they want for their ecosystem to work, which is fine, but it's not as integrated as it is on Apple, for example. Google has the advantage of owning Android, so all of its devices can be based on Android, except their desktop platform, which is based on Chrome OS, which hasn't taken off and isn't doing too well. And there are rumors that they've just sort of killed off their Pixel Chrome OS line, so who knows what's going on there. So their ecosystem is kind of incomplete and only has one OS. Microsoft, on the other hand, has the desktop side of things nailed. They've got Windows. That's done and dusted. And Windows runs on PC. I was going to say phones. Windows doesn't run on phones, but it does run on desktops, laptops, and tablets. And they are slowly improving Windows to work better on tablets. And I believe that's going to be a bit of a endeavor for them through the next version of Windows, codenamed Next Valley, as we're referring to it. Android, of course, will be their phone platform of choice. And that's what we're seeing with Android 12L. And I think that's going to continue with the next release, Android 14 or the Surface Duo 3, whichever comes first. The coherency, the consistency between them will grow closer. The whole idea of Android, the Surface Duo, and Android in general being an extension of the Windows PC is certainly something that Microsoft wants to grasp with both hands and embrace. They want to treat the Surface Duo like a Windows device, even though it's not running Windows. And we are going to see that going forward. So this is an exciting time if you're a Surface fan, if you're a Microsoft ecosystem user. I think it's time to start thinking about the Surface Duo, because Microsoft is slowly but surely finally getting to that point where they're actually able to treat the Duo like another Surface and treat it as part of that ecosystem, with the laptop, with the earbuds, with the headphones. The only thing we're missing at this point is the watch, and I don't know if they're going to do a watch. I've not heard that they've got plans to do a watch. But if they really want to complete the ecosystem, they've got the productivity aspect nailed. Now it's time for the luxuries. It's time for the other things that aren't maybe productivity based, and that includes a watch. So maybe that'll happen one day. But the phone stuff, I'm super excited about. I'm so glad Microsoft is doing this and they're not giving up on the Duo. I know it's going to seem like that because there's not going to be a Duo next week, and people are going to start questioning the future of this form factor. Just remember what we've said. There was no Duo 3 this year anyway. That's been the case for so long now. But they are working on a new Android phone, I promise.
Yeah, and regarding a watch, I'm mixed on the idea because obviously Google just announced the Pixel Watch, and it looks really nice, right? Like, there's no reason why if you're a Duo 2 owner, you don't just pick that up. You're going to get everything that you want, including some Fitbit integration. You get the smartphone notifications and heart rate and all that jazz. So I'm not sure what Microsoft could necessarily bring to the table in terms of a smartwatch.
Right.
Again, this is a problem when people just imagine things. It's like, Microsoft should do a smartwatch. It's like, all right, so give me the argument of like how they're going to differentiate it. Oh, they're going to make their own operating system for it. It's like, probably not. And Microsoft doesn't have a great history of making little operating systems in that. Although, they've done the band in the past, but I'm still not sure what. Okay, so what does it do? It does heart rate. It does sleep analysis. Right. Like these are all technologies that require some, advanced work, and it would be easier just to go with Watch OS, which presumably has some of this stuff built in. Like, I'm not sure. Okay, what does it do? You said it would be more of a luxury device, so it would get away from productivity. It's like, I don't know the angle here that would justify them doing it. Yeah. Again, I get why people in their head think it's a brilliant idea, but when you start to make the argument for it, it's kind of hard, I think, to do so, especially since there are so many smartwatch options out there for Android, whether they're like $50 bands that you put on for fitness or a couple $100 smartwatches. I'm not sure where Microsoft fits in there. Of course, you could say the same thing with Surface earbuds. Although they did make a productivity argument for that via swiping to change your PowerPoint.
I can already think of it's the same argument. What they will do is they will come out on stage, they'll announce this Surface Watch, whatever it may be, and it'll be like, the first time will be, look at this, tap, next slide. That's literally what that would be the productivity focus, because that's been literally what they did with the earbuds. The earbuds are not a productivity device, really, but they were like, by the way, slide. So
yeah, it's a ridiculous argument. I'm sure someone put that team put that in there just to be like,
of course,
Satya will like this. Yeah. It's got to have a Microsoft 365 tie in there for it to succeed. It reminds me of not to get sidetracked here, but there was this tweet that went out this week. It had a couple screenshots from alleged Google employees, one current, one former, talking about why Google kills so much stuff. People used to make fun of Microsoft for it, but now Google's way surpassed them. As you know, Google just killed Stadia, which I still think it's too early for them to have done that, but it is what it is. But the consensus was that the reason that happens is because Google, their internal structure rewards people for launching products. But once a product is launched, it's not considered ideal to remain on those teams anymore. So the engineers and developers who launch the product, as soon as it launches, tend to head off onto other products. And the reason is when you put that you are involved on launches for services or devices, that's what gets you basically raises and promotions within the company. While if you remain on a project and just work on bug fixes and, bring new stuff out, it doesn't advance your career. And so the idea here is like, once a product is launched, a lot of people just don't care about the product anymore because a lot of the star people behind it have moved on to other projects. And I think that's really kind of an interesting thing of why, I don't know, Google basically kills a lot of stuff. I'm not sure if Microsoft does quite that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Real quick, I just want to clarify because people in the chat got excited. There is no Surface Watch. I am not hearing that there is a Surface Watch. It is
Right.
not in development internally. That's not what I was saying. It was a hypothetical. If Microsoft wanted to expand its ecosystem portfolio, where could they go next? They've got the phone. We thought there would never be a Surface phone. Then they finally did one. Where would it go next? The watch, I think, is the most obvious choice. Or, AR glasses. That's kind of, I think, the actual next thing. Watches, I think they've missed. Wearable glasses that actually look like glasses and aren't like big, bulky headset is probably the next area. But would they want to go there as well? Maybe. I believe that you pointed out this week to me, Dan, that they are still hiring for mixed reality experiences.
Yes.
So I guess they
and
have...
some people are coming back to the team too, which is interesting.
So I guess they have a vision there, but whether or not that's a consumer-focused vision is another question entirely.
Yeah, who knows on that?
Yeah,
the watch stuff, like we've always said, maybe they have to be conceptualizing something internally and thinking about wearables.
Because wearables are the future. So the Surface team must have thought about it. They must have prototyped some sort of wearable ideas, whether they be watches, glasses, contact lenses, plug-in ear things, who knows, but they've definitely prototyped different form factor ideas, because wearables is the future of computing. That is where this is all ultimately going to end up. So for Surface to not be thinking about that would be bonkers.
It's funny too, because I did write an article, I believe it was in 2019, right after Surface Duo was announced. I was like, all right, if Microsoft needs to now do a watch to complete this experience. So we've been obviously thinking about that for a long time. I think it became pretty obvious. That said, I've moved away from smartwatches in the last few years, as I've alluded to previously, because I prefer real watches as an adult. I don't mean that to be condescending, but that, and I don't have an issue with checking my notifications on Duo and opening it up. I don't like to be a slave to my devices anymore in terms of notifications. I do have an Apple Watch, which I use at the gym, but it's a glorified timer / controls my music. That's the only reason I use it at the gym for. And it works well for that, but I don't wear it otherwise. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Real quick, Trev mentioned, just back talking about the ecosystem thing, he said the reason he chooses Windows is that it's not something that tries to lock you into an ecosystem. I don't copy Apple. And I wasn't saying that Microsoft is going to lock down Windows so that it only works on Surface devices. That's not what I was saying. Windows will always work on third-party devices. Dell, HP, OEMs in general will always be able to build Windows PCs, and the experience between those different devices will always be as the same as Surface. Surface will never have a unique experience to those hardware form factors. It's just not going to happen, because Microsoft needs to treat its partners as equal to Surface to remain fair. The extension to the Surface Duo is only notable only because the Duo sort of launched and it didn't have those extensions. Samsung devices were more compatible with Phone Link, for example, than Surface Duo was. And that's still the case even now. That gap is slowly closing, and I understand that gap will be fully closed at some point. But it just took a while for the Duo to catch up. And that's not to say that Microsoft is only going to limit Phone Link to the Duo in the future. No, that's not going to happen. Phone Link will always be available to any Android device that wants to link using the Phone Companion app on the Google Play Store. And functionality will be as good as it possibly can be for an app that isn't a system-level app, unless you preload it like Samsung does. And I think, who else does it now? Is it Honor? Another OEM does it as well now, where it's preloaded and it gets additional functions.
Yes. Oh, Huawei does a lot of stuff like that too.
Huawei, yeah.
Yeah, all the Chinese brands pretty much have some sort of phone stuff. But the bigger thing, of course, is what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Intel Unison. I think that's going to be a bigger phone integration than even your phone will be, Phone Link will be. And that will also work on Surface Duo 2, or at least there should be no reason why it shouldn't work there.
But yeah, my point was with the ecosystem comment was that Microsoft is finally doing its own ecosystem with Surface. That doesn't mean the ecosystem will be exclusive to Surface, but Microsoft can now have a portfolio of software and hardware, both Windows and Android, that can be presented as a family of products, similar to how Google does it with the Pixel line, similar to how Apple does it with all of its products, and how Samsung does it with all of its products. So it's good to see options and choices, and I'm glad Microsoft is still in this game of trying to have that ecosystem, even though they lost their mobile platform, which a lot of people at the time were like, this is it, this is the end of Microsoft, this will be the downfall of Microsoft, just slowly but surely. They seem to have survived it, and they seem to still be relevant in, especially the desktop market, though who knows how long that will last. I know it's fair to say that Surface isn't a popular line of PCs, but it certainly gets the attention of the media like Apple does. All of the websites cover Surfaces when they get announced and whatnot. It's always those get hands-on videos. It's very similar treatment to Apple products. So they do certainly have that mind share. They just don't have the market share, which they
never were meant to.
Yeah, exactly. They can't because they've got partners. They're probably not even allowed to. If Surface does too good, they got to kill it.
Yeah, right. No, they just jack up the price.
Yeah, right. That's why the Studio 2. Tell you what, if there were actual Studio competitors, the Studio wouldn't be as expensive as it is. But because there isn't, they have to price it up really high. Because if it was the only thing that was selling well, then it would look bad for everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be no reason to enter the market.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Anyway, let's move on. Early Windows 8 concepts were shared. I didn't even get to read this story, but I know you did. So why don't you talk about what the actual story was here?
Yeah, so Steven Sinofsky, if you remember him, he was the lead manager on the Windows 8 project. He actually led a number of projects. He was the man who turned Windows around through its Windows Vista phase. He is who delivered Windows 7, and then he moved on to deliver Windows 8. He delivered a number of other products beforehand in the office space as well. So, a lot of his products were very successful. But Windows 8 is the product I think he's remembered for the most for being a total failure and is ultimately what drove him out of the company. But this week, the last handful of months, in fact, he's been writing a book where he talks about his time at Microsoft. And he's done it chronologically, so I think he started in the 90s or maybe even the 80s, I don't know. And he's worked his way up until 2010, 2011, I think he's at now. And he's finally starting to talk about his sort of take on his time at Microsoft leading the Windows 8 project. And this week he shared a number of very early concepts and sort of visions and ideas for what the Windows 8 project was going to entail. And it basically just shows off a number of early designs and sort of thoughts and ideas as to what this version of Windows was going to be. What's really interesting in there is that he talks about how at some point in 2009 or 2010 there was a big presentation with a number of employees. I think it was in Redmond, thousands of them I think it was, and it was his chance to be like, hey, here's the next version of Windows, here's what we're doing. And they were using phrases like tailored web experiences, which at the time nobody really understood what that meant, but what he meant is apps. Because remember, 2010 is a very different time to now. Mm-hmm. I know 2010 doesn't seem like that long ago, but the concepts of apps and app stores was still a very new thing for the tech world in 2010. So what Steven Sinofsky is doing here when he refers to tailored web experiences is he's referring to apps. So it's really interesting to see how the phrase apps wasn't even settled on yet among platforms and whatnot. But yeah, he's talking about how there'll be an app store, essentially, this idea that this focus on simplicity, on touch, on tiles, the whole sort of tile interface, the early concepts for it is here, and you can see it in its sort of early ideas. Very interesting to see how far it came from where it sort of started as a concept. In the concept he showed, for example, the start screen, along the bottom, there's a load of text: start, what's new, marketplace. And the idea was that this is a cool idea that never shipped, I don't believe, but the Windows Store would have like partner stores within it. So you'd be able to have, say, Netflix be its own sort of storefront within the Microsoft Store or the Windows Store, where you could choose content through there without having to download an app. All great ideas, and that sort of clearly stems from the whole idea from the People Hub on Windows Phone, which was the one app for all of the social networks, which was a great idea until the social networks were like, actually, no, we want to control our own apps. Thank you very much. So yeah, it's basically just a good early look at what Windows 8 was going to be. He talks about here, sitting behind Steve Ballmer or next to Steve Ballmer as that presentation was going on, and he mentions at one point he leans over and Steve Ballmer says to him, "What about Office?" Because obviously they're talking about all these new app experiences and stuff. And Stephen's like, we purposely didn't mention Office in this presentation because, frankly, we didn't know what they were going to do. And now we all know that, with hindsight, they did nothing. They didn't jump on this at all. They stuck with Win32 and they kept to it to this day. So, yeah, very interesting.
Too much work.
Yeah, right, exactly. Too much work. So if you are interested in this, so it's chapter 1 of many for the Windows 8 journey, at least. He's releasing them weekly. I'm sure he's going to talk more about the upbringing of Windows 8 and eventually lead into Surface, because a lot of people forget this, but he was one of the people behind Surface. He's the reason why Surface was born, because he was building Windows 8. And if you actually read this chapter and a few chapters prior, he was very fascinated and obsessed with the iPad, and I think that's very obvious when you actually look at Windows 8.
Right.
But a lot of the iPad inspired Windows 8 and inspired Surface. That's just how it is, and he's very open and honest about that. You know, he went to the D9 conference in 2007 or 2008, where Steve Jobs is talking about. No, it can't have been. It must have been 2010, where he talks about how the iPad was an idea before the iPhone. It's a very famous talk. I'm sure many of you have already heard it. And Steven Sinofsky was apparently there in the front row, listening, taking notes and stuff. And one of the comments Steve Jobs mentions is how he thinks pens or styluses are terrible, that they don't belong on digital products and whatnot. And I guess Steven Sinofsky was like, wrong.
Microsoft had already been doing pens for a long time at that point.
Yeah, which to be fair, I think that Steve Jobs' comment at the time was a jab at Bill Gates, because tablet PCs were a thing. Windows XP had them, but they all had pen accessories. And what Steve Jobs was doing was sort of taking a dig at the attempts prior to the iPad. And Microsoft stuck to their guns, to be fair to them. They were like, no, pens do work. And to this day, they still ship PCs with pen support. So good on them for sticking with that. But this is where it all started, with this chapter, with the iPad, with Steven Sinofsky being obsessed with it and wanting to compete with that. And I'm going to be really interested to see how his book goes over the next few weeks. It's an online book. I've referred to it as a book, but it's like he releases each chapter on his blog that he refers to as a book. So next Sunday or Monday, he will release a new chapter where I think he's going to start talking about the early sort of workings of the silicon, the idea of moving Windows to ARM, and that will obviously lead into Surface, which once he drops that chapter, I'm sure we'll be talking about that as well.
Interesting stuff. Especially as we come on the 10th anniversary of Surface next week.
It was good timing, but really funny. He also mentions the Courier, because if you remember, the Courier was a 2010 sort of thing as well, and the Courier was leaked, and then it was leaked that it was cancelled, sort of around the same time as the iPad, as far as I remember. And he talks briefly about that and how it looks terrible for Microsoft because Apple was innovating with this new form factor, and Microsoft was seen as killing innovation because they were killing off this dual screen concept. And then in that same post, he's like, oh, by the way, because a lot of the reports blamed him and a couple of other...
No, it was Bill Gates that killed it, I thought.
No, you're right. But I think an original report also referred to Steven Sinofsky and cited him as not wanting Courier because he was doing Windows 8 and the Courier was going to run something else. And while it's true that Sinofsky, well, according to Sinofsky himself, of course, while he says that, I was concerned as to what this product was going to run, because he admits that the Courier wasn't his project. It was happening in a different team. He didn't know about it, and it wasn't under his leadership. So
Ballard, I think was his name.
Jay Allard, I think, had it. But when he learned about it, he was concerned as to what version of Windows it would run. It wasn't cancelled because it wasn't going to run Windows 8, which it might have done eventually. It was cancelled because the actual team that was building it decided not to do it, according to him. He had nothing to do with its cancellation. He just expressed concerns because he wanted to make sure it was going to run the same version as everything else, because he'd spent the last few years aligning all of the Windows products so they were basically on the same code base, and he didn't want to go back to a time before that where there were different versions of Windows for different things. And
this is no different than Windows Phone and Kin.
Totally.
How that happened.
Absolutely, yeah. I wonder if he ever mentions Kin. Yeah.
Kin was another... That was just a head scratcher when that happened, because they were cool devices, and they would have been kind of cool devices had Windows Phone and Windows Mobile not existed. But since they did, it was like, why are you doing these two things? And that goes to show how Microsoft's leadership when it came to mobile was always kind of all over the place. And their strategy was very different.
Funny you mentioned that. Stephen also mentions the Windows Phone 7/8 sort of, because he was building Windows 8 and Windows 7, and at the time, Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8 was also happening, which also wasn't under him. That wasn't his project. But with Windows...
That was, I believe, Terry Myerson and Joe Belfiore.
Yeah, that's right. And with Windows in 2010, Steven Sinofsky, I'm sort of now going to paraphrase things here because I don't remember exactly what he wrote, but he essentially somebody wanted to align the schedules because Windows Phone was on an entirely different development cycle, and that was even true up until Windows 8 release. Windows 8 came out before Windows Phone 8 did, if I remember rightly, or it was the other way around. One of them came out first, and that's because they weren't aligned. These were two separate projects. And it wasn't until Windows 10, after Sinofsky left, where those projects finally aligned. But many could say that that mistake of not aligning in 2010 was the reason Windows Phone was never as successful, because it never had the full support of Microsoft, because everybody was on the Windows project, and the Windows Phone project was this sort of afterthought that nobody really paid attention to, when it was should have really been the focus point, because that's where everything was moving. And that decision to have them as separate things up until 2014, 2015 was probably the bullet that stopped Windows Phone from ever being a successful thing.
And Gates and Ballmer have both gone on record saying that their biggest regret is not taking mobile more seriously. But they did have other problems at the time, right? Vista was this garbage dumpster fire that they had to fix. And that's what Sanofsky was doing with Windows 8, 7 and then 8. But, they had other issues. They had Office to contend with, and then they were trying to do SkyDrive at the time. And they just didn't see phones and mobile being the next big thing. While I think a lot of people, including myself, were all over this stuff, and it was like, oh, Microsoft's here, they're doing stuff, but they didn't put their full resources behind it, and that's been acknowledged. So I always say, when people talk about Windows Phone's failure, people always want to point to, like, it didn't have apps, or the store employees didn't push it, or this and that, and like all that is technically true. There's actually a bunch of reasons, but the source of it always goes back to the original, the Windows Mobile. I mean, it's just Microsoft never took it that seriously. It was always basically a side project, and they eventually got in and, we could sell licenses on this too, but they didn't see it as the future of mobile computing in general. And it was a big miss. And because of that, they never invested in it. They should have done their own phone from the beginning. And they didn't. There's a lot of things here but it all cascaded after that. Everything was too late afterwards. By the time Windows Phone 7 came out, it had already been 3 years since iPhone had been out, and Android had already just hit the market. So.
And the first big real issue that the Windows Phone hit as a platform was the reset between Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8. Straight away, they were like, actually, we're starting again, and that is because there was no alignment between Windows Mobile and Windows Desktop. They were two different products, two different teams, two different leaders. They weren't aligned, and so there was no teamwork, there was no coherent vision, so everything was all over the place. That's why Windows Phone 7 and Microsoft Kin launched in the same year. Microsoft released two competing mobile platforms and killed one of them within 8 weeks, I think it was, or something like that. It was ridiculous how mismanaged that whole thing was, and frankly, a real shame, because that is the reason that was the moment the Titanic hit the iceberg for Windows Phone. It was 2010, and from then it was doomed, regardless of what they did.
Absolutely, it was always an uphill climb from that point. They were just riding on their name at that point. And the fact that Windows Phone 7 was so different looking, right? It did
beautiful.
Get saved. It was saved in a lot of ways by its UI and user experience. That's what really got it a lot of attention. People
wanted it to be successful, but it had an incompetent maker.
That's true. Anywho, let's move on. Acer announced the new Swift Edge. I just want to talk about this briefly because it's kind of a cool laptop. It already has won 2 design awards, which is interesting. So the Acer Swift Edge is a 16-inch OLED laptop. It's basically a half-inch thin, and it only weighs 2.5 pounds, which I guess I convert to the grams. That's 1.17 kilograms for you non-freedom lovers. And it's a pretty crazy laptop. And it's not plastic. It's made out of a magnesium alloy. And so it's actually pretty rigid. The display is a 3840 by 2400 resolution. So it's effectively basically 4K. It's not technically 4K because it doesn't use 16 by 9. It's a 16 by 10, which is the correct aspect ratio. Otherwise, or 3 by 2 is even better. But and it's powered by the AMD Ryzen 7 6000 series, specifically Ryzen 5 66. Oh, I've got a number there, 6650U, all the way up to the AMD Ryzen 7 Pro 6850U. Sorry, getting there, all the names. So that's an octa-core processor, but it's the U series. So this is for like thin and light kind of laptops. What makes this laptop interesting? It's a 16-inch, and with a 92% screen to body ratio, so very thin bezels. This thing is all display when you open it, but it only weighs 2.5 pounds, which is absurd. And it reminded me very much, same thing with Rich Edmonds, one of our oldest writers here on the site, of the 2014 Aspire S7, also from Acer. And that laptop was a 13-inch one, and it was ridiculously thin, and it had a glass top on it. It was really nice. But it's a 13-inch laptop, and it weighed 2.8 pounds, which is just shows you how far things have come, right? And it only had like I believe that was Intel 2nd-gen processor, which was kind of funny, probably dual core. And so 13-inch, 2.8 pounds. Now we're at a 16-inch, but 2.5 pounds. Like, it is just absurd. This thing feels like you could just toss it around and it feels like nothing. But like I said, it's nice and sturdy. It's got a ton of ports too. It's got a 2 USB Type-C, 3.2 Gen 2. So that's it's not USB 4, which is, a little bit disappointing. But this also isn't a super expensive device. Not really. Also has 2 Type A ports and a full HDMI, which is kind of nice. And of course, it's got DTS audio. The display hits 500 nits max, so it is HDR 500. It's true black. It's 100% DCI EP3. It's got PCIe 4 SSD in it, up to 1 terabyte. But yeah, it's a super thin laptop. It's won 2 design awards, the Red Dot 2022. If you don't know Red Dot, they always they award things for design and industrial things, including technology. And they also won the 2022 Good Design Award, which I hadn't heard of before. But yeah, kind of a cool laptop. It is now available. You can actually get it at Costco. It starts, the Costco version is $1,499. That's not super cheap, but that does feature the Ryzen 7, so you're going to get the fastest U series, basically 16 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. So it's actually kind of the maxed out version. I imagine eventually they're going to have other SKUs coming out, and it'll be more like around $1,000 when you do it down. So congrats to Acer for setting the world record for the lightest 16-inch OLED laptop. Pretty cool laptop, though. It's nice to see how this technology evolves. Speaking of technology, I'm using a new microphone. I would say this week, but I'm going to probably end up sticking with this mic going forward. As some of you may know, we use primarily HyperX microphones on this podcast. We were both using the HyperX Quadcast for the longest time. I was using the Quadcast with RGB lighting because it made it a little bit cooler, even though I have it all covered up and you can't see it. And Zach has the regular Quadcast. And that's a really nice microphone. I believe it's $150. It's kind of their top tier, basically. And it's a very flexible microphone. It has a mute button on top, which is pretty wild. But this week they announced a new one called the Procast. And what makes the Procast Pro is really interesting. It's an XLR microphone. So when you go into mics, obviously, you have USB microphones where you just plug them into the computer, and that's that. And then you have XLR. XLR is way more flexible. You can basically use this microphone in an actual studio that goes into a professional mixer, because an XLR cable is way bigger and thicker. It's got the 3 prongs. And how you do it on a PC is you need an external mixer. I use one called, it's a Behringer. And so you run the cable from the mic, input into the mixer, and then that has the gain and controls on that. And then that has a USB out that then goes to the PC if you want to use it that way. This microphone also has a 1-inch, a 1-inch gold condenser. So it's a condenser mic, which is a high end, but the diaphragm is huge. 1 inch is massive, and you can see it. I posted the photos of it. You can see the diaphragm. It's absolutely massive. And what this does in terms of XLR and the quality of the diaphragm is going to do is it gives a more rich, professional sounding audio. Basically, it's richer, it's fuller. It's ideal for recording voice. It's what this type of microphone is what a lot of people use in the studios for recording audio. Obviously, those could go way higher in price, So, but this is aimed at the consumer market, or I should say the prosumer market, hence the name. It does cost $250, so it is not a cheap microphone. But again, this is aimed at people who are professional influencers, professional YouTubers, professional game streamers, people who just want to record the best audio that they can directly on a PC without little effort. It does have the shock mount that HyperX is known for. So, with your table shakes, basically. The microphone doesn't pick that up. It also does have the little windscreen that clips on there, so you don't get pop noises as much. I don't know. You guys let me know how it sounds in comments. Obviously, we're streaming to YouTube, so it may not sound as good, but if you listen to the recorded podcast afterwards, you might be able to hear the quality of it and compare it to, well, you can compare it to Zach. Obviously, Zach's using the Quadcast currently still.
Yes.
But this mic is now available. And I don't know, this is like one of the best mics I've ever used. And when I heard the recordings of it, I was like, dang, this thing is pretty awesome. So that's a HyperX Procast.
Did you say it requires an sort of XLR thing? Yeah.
Yes, and they don't include an XLR cable.
That's just extra, isn't it? I really like the convenience of USB. Just plug and play, baby.
Yeah, so you couldn't really travel with this mic. I mean, you could, the mixer isn't big. A mixer is only like, I don't know, it's not, it's a little box basically. But you would still, you would still have to pack that with you in a laptop. I mean, it's doable. I mean, it's no different than packing any other dock accessory kind of thing. But yeah, this is meant for more permanent setups. XLRs have higher bandwidth in the cables and everything. They're just better quality. It's a better signal ratio basically or something. So, but yeah, you have to buy your own XLR cable and your own mixer to get this to work. But cool stuff from HyperX, who is now owned by HP. All right, my doggy is getting antsy. I think she wants to go for a walk. So we'll do the hardware roundup. We do Rocat Vulcan 2 mini mechanical keyboard was reviewed by Ben Wilson. He asked the question, is this too much RGB? Which, of course, that's not possible. Beautiful photo, though. It does have a lot of RGB. So the reason this has a lot of RGB is because it has the clear side. When you do keycaps, you could have like clear sides. A lot of RGB keyboards are like solid black, the keycaps, and just the letter will be the RGB. This one does a different style, which is becoming more popular, which is their clear sides, and the keycap tops are black. So you see way more of the LED lit up. He gave it 4 out of 5. Dazzling dual LED RGB lighting, smooth linear switches. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of linear, but it's not bad. Customizable keycaps. The Gans Swarm Companion app has a learning curve. Slick, glossy keycaps. Ooh, those bother me. And it's almost too much RGB, but you should be able to manipulate that. But that is a cool looking keyboard. That's the Rocat Vulcan 2 Mini, which is pretty solid. So that's looks like a TKL keyboard. So it's missing all the number pad and all that, or maybe even be a 60. Other reviews, SanDisk Pro Blade System. This is kind of funny. I remember hearing about this. Is people comparing it to the zip drive coming back to PC. If you know what a zip drive is, congrats, you're old. I used to have zip drives. I probably still have them laying around somewhere, but they're all probably encrypted, and I have no idea how to read them anymore. So you can go check out that review. It's for people who like to store a lot of stuff. So solid build quality, modular design, easy to upgrade and expand storage. It's made out of metal. And that got 4.5 out of 5 for the review, which is kind of nice. Xbox Elite Controller Series 2 Core review. Yeah, the Elite controllers are back from Microsoft, although this one's a slightly more stripped down version, costing $130, and Jez reviewed it. And it's really nice looking, but the big lingering question with the Elite controllers are, will they last? There are endless reports of people buying Elite controllers and then them literally falling apart after a year or two.
Mine did.
Which is such a weird thing to happen. It's not like it breaks. It's like it falls apart. It has to do with the rubber grips and the way it's assembled, I guess. So maybe they fixed it. Hopefully they fixed it. I don't know. You can take the risk. Corsair K100 Air Wireless Review, a groundbreaking ultra-thin mechanical keyboard. That also got 4 out of 5 stars. So that's a cool looking device. That's got the number pad on it, looks like, at least. So, and then the Lenovo Thinkpad Z16. So we already did the Z13. This is Lenovo's new ThinkPad Z series, which is aimed at, you can say, like millennials, basically. It's a business laptop, but it's for people who want it allows them to get away from the traditional ThinkPad design, the all black, and you know how ThinkPads all basically look the same.
Yeah.
This one looks way more modern. It's got like an edge-to-edge keyboard. It's got super thin bezels. It's kind of squared off. It also is exclusively powered by AMD Ryzen processors. It also has a haptic touchpad, or what's known as a force pad, which is pretty great. And yeah, that got 4 out of 5 reviews too. So the ThinkPad Z16 or the smaller Z13 are pretty great looking laptops. They also have very good cameras on them, but it's made for the people who want to have a laptop for work that meets the work requirements, but also is a cool consumer laptop that you won't mind busting out at, you know, the store, or sorry, at Starbucks or whatever coffee shop you go to. And I think that does it for all the reviews. I guess get the thing of the week. Zach, you got a thing of the week?
I guess I have a tip for Twitter users outside of the US. So this week, Twitter rolled out editable, that's correct, editable tweets on Twitter for Twitter Blue subscribers. Unfortunately, when I found out this news, I also found out that Twitter Blue is only available in, I think, 4 markets: United States, Canada, New Zealand, and I think Australia. Weird, yeah, but there you are. So if you are outside of those regions, you cannot subscribe to Twitter Blue, and as a result, you are unable to edit your own tweets, which is ridiculous. So I thought about, you know, I wanted to try and subscribe to Twitter Blue without being an American or somebody from Australia. So, you know, I sort of looked up online, seen if people tried this, and it is possible. You can, via a VPN, if you download a VPN of your choice, set it to New Zealand, sign into Twitter, you will see the option to subscribe to Twitter Blue. Now, this does work in the UK. I'm not sure if it works anywhere else, so your mileage may vary on this, but in the UK, this does work. You go to the subscribe thing on the Twitter website, fill in all your details on the website where you actually put in your credit card details and whatnot. Make sure the location is set to New Zealand. It may be tempting to set it to your area. Don't do that because it will error out. Set it to New Zealand. It's fine. Put in your details, hit go, and it will subscribe you, and it will take money from your account. It's only, I think it's $6.99 New Zealand dollars, which equates to about £3.65, I think, in the UK. But I think it's worth it for editing tweets. So if you are somebody dying to edit your tweets, you can get it outside the US and all of those other markets by following that guide.
Twitter's been rolling out a lot of new features, some of which aren't. So a lot of them aren't tied to Twitter Blue, but they're also rolling out in waves to only a few users. So recently, just yesterday, I got a new feature that allows me to finally attach GIFs, a photo, and a video all in the same tweet, which is amazing. And I've already been using it a lot because I could put a picture or something and also embed the video, and you get both experience. So that's cool. There's also the new status symbol, status setting you can do, status labels, I think they call them, where it sits at the top of the tweet and they have like canned responses. It's almost like the old instant messenger days, but there's like one like gaming right now or living the dream, and like it has all these like kind of presets. And they added more recently. It's kind of cool. You can do like picture of the day. There's one of like for pets and all this kind of stuff. And they're just kind of clever little things. There's one called a hot take with a little pepper, I think it is. And it's like, you know, it's just if you want to obviously give a off the cuff opinion on something that's just your initial take, you just put that on there and people know it's a hot take. That's kind of cool. There was also something else that was announced or that I was able to get recently. Now I forgot what it was, but yeah, edit tweets is now part of Twitter Blue, which I have, which is kind of nice. So they actually been rolling out quite a bit of features, whether changing anything with Twitter or, you know, obviously Elon Musk now says he wants to buy Twitter. Of course, he's saying that because there's probably a good chance he's going to get screwed in court because, I mean, I loved how people were like, oh, he's going to go to court and prove that Twitter's a fraud and they're going to be invested. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that's going to actually happen. I think he's going to be forced to buy the company. And it looks like that's what was going to happen. His lawyers kind of said, you know, we may not be able to do this. So the contingency with that case is that he's saying that I'll buy Twitter, but you got to call off the lawsuit and shut it down, basically. And he also is putting in there a thing about financing again, whether or not he can secure, and if he can't, he can back out. So a lot of people are skeptical that he's actually trying to buy Twitter. Rather, he's trying to get rid of the court case set up a new deal that will still allow him to back out of it because he won't be able to secure financing because the market is basically kind of tanked in the last few months and he's lost a lot of capital. We'll see what happens with that whole thing. I don't know. Twitter's is always an exciting, interesting technology, but I got to say they've introduced and rolled out more features in the last couple days and weeks than I've seen in years. Yeah. You can co-tweet now, which is kind of interesting. What else is there? There's like quite a few things that they've done. And Twitter Blue obviously gives you more features. Like you can upload videos longer than 10 minutes and they're full HD, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't verify you though. So
it does not verify you, right? Yeah, that's still an issue for Zach. Someday that'll happen. I don't know if I really have a thing. Well, I guess my thing of the week I tweeted about is I know Zach doesn't care, but my new watch that I got is a G-Shock. The Casio G-Shock.
Okay, can I just say, like, as someone who isn't a watch guy, a lot of the watches you show me, I can see the appeal. They look nice. They're very stylish.
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
So for people who don't know, so people who know, right? A Casio G-Shock goes back to the 1980s. I think it was the DW 5600 was the original. And what makes a G-Shock really interesting, it's a digital watch, and this is the Square. They call them the Casio Squares, basically, and they're super rugged. They did all these tests, like they drop them from like huge things, and like the development of it took a long time to make the case that secures it so that it can withstand water, it can shock damage and all this. And they're just meant to be really rugged electronic devices. And back in the 80s, that was a big deal because this technology was so new, right? I mean, digital quartz had only come out in the 70s. So they were really at the cusp here of that. And it was affordable. Like you can, and they still make that watch. You can buy like these initial watches for some are $50, some are 150. And then what makes this one even more interesting is, and they make these too, is it's solar powered. So it's never going to die.
Yeah.
So you don't plug it in, you just leave it in the sun, it charges up. So this thing is going to last a long time. It has Bluetooth, so it can connect to your phone to do some basic things like syncing and everything. But it has an atomic, it's called Band 6, and it's a little antenna in it. So every night at 2 a.m., this thing picks up a signal from an atomic clock. There are 6 atomic clocks on the planet. One is, I believe, in Colorado. There's 2 in Japan, 1 in England. And what this thing does is it just picks up the signal that's traveling through the air and it syncs the time. And so to the second, this thing is accurate. And it's because all clocks lose time, even digital. Digital watches lose anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds a month. That's why there are atomic clocks that they don't. And so this thing is always going to be synced up perfectly to time, which is pretty wild. So the version I got is a special version. So they make G-Shocks that go up in price because it has such a following to them. So this is one of the more expensive ones because it's made out of all titanium, which is an expensive material and it's hard to work with. It's also DLC coated, which means diamond-like carbon coating, which gives it this black look, and it's basically it's hard to scratch and damage is the whole thing. It also has a sapphire crystal on it and a screw down case back. And this one they call it the Mecca G-Shock because it looks like roughly based on Japanese mecha, the anime stuff with the big robots. It's a combination of mecha and sci-fi, and it just has labels all over it. So the G-Shocks are weird. I get it. The first time you see a G-Shock, Zach, you're like, that thing's ugly.
Yeah.
But they have such a cult following. Like if you go and search for G-Shocks, Casio still releases like all these limited editions and 9,000 colors, and some are only made in Japan, like this one, which have higher quality control standards. The military, a lot of people in the military use them. Not this one. They use the Ranger Man, they call it, because they're just indestructible. But yeah, I mean, if the world goes into an apocalypse, this watch is going to, it's going to be awesome because I'm going to have perfect time forever and it'll never die. And you could say like, maybe it doesn't make sense, but it's just interesting that this watch is going to be good for at least 30 years, maybe 50 years. Like there's really nothing that's going to go with it. Whereas an Apple Watch, maybe you get the one that costs $700 and then it's going to be in 2 to 3 years, it's obsolete, right?
Yeah.
but Casio has been doing the same stuff, just improving it for like 40 years. And it's just, I don't know. It's just cool stuff. But if you're not into it, I totally understand. That's very understandable.
I'm a shallow man. It's design over form for me.
Yeah, but a lot of people love the design on it.
function,
So
rather.
it's super comfortable on the wrist. And it's just, well, this is definitely function over design in a lot of ways. But the design is so iconic.
Yeah,
They
sure.
make one of this called the MRG, and it costs $4,000.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that one is like you start to you look at this one, you think it's absurd. Like that one is like even more absurd. Like even the circuitry uses gold because
Really?
it lasts longer and all this stuff. Like the Japanese, I love Japanese culture because when it comes to design and art, they have such this focus on discipline and accuracy and perfection.
Yeah.
And it gets carried on from generation to generation. And so like whatever thing they have, there's always something that's going to be higher than it that is like I have a watch, it's a Grand Seiko. It's made by two people. There's the person who just makes the case, and then there's the person who handles the movement. So that watch is assembled just by two people. And it's like it takes months to do, and it's like to the standard that is like unparalleled in the world. It's like I think that's just awesome, and everything about their culture is like that. I just think the Germans are kind of like this too, but I just think it's just interesting if you're into tech and everything.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Even their laptops,
Yeah.
their laptops are pretty wild. Anywho, I think that does it for the podcast. We'll do some Q&A with the audience, as always, while we're around here about things we did talk about or didn't talk about otherwise. If you're listening to this recorded, you don't get to hear that part, but you can go watch it on our YouTube channel at Windows Central. Follow me. We do record that, I should say, every Friday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And it looks like the YouTube is freezing now. I don't know what's going on with that. My camera just froze.
You're fine now.
Okay. Sorry. So records 1:30 p.m. Fridays, and you go to our YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, or Zach as ZACBOWDEN. As always, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone. And my dog, he really wants attention. What's going on? I know. We'll go for a walk soon.
So yes, if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. We will hang out for a few minutes and try our best to answer them.
I'm be there in a sec. I'm just getting a lot of face licks right now.
Okay. Are you hearing anything around a haptic touchpad on the type cover for Surface Pro 9? Sadly not. It's something I would like to see, but I don't know if that will happen this year. Should I trade in my iPhone 13 mini and get an iPhone 14 Plus? You've inspired me by trading in your iPhone 12 mini for an iPhone 13 mini.
There you go.
So
It's nice. I have no regrets about that upgrade. I mean, financially, I don't know. It makes a ton of sense. But like the cameras are better, definitely way better battery life, and it has a slightly smaller notch, which I'll always take. But
on the mini, the smaller notch does actually make a difference.
Yeah. No, I'm really happy with the iPhone 13 mini, and I'm going to have to be for the next couple of years because there's nothing else. Would you stop chewing that? All right.
Are you expecting any surprises from the devices event next week? No, not really. This is Microsoft. They may pull something out of the hat towards the end, but I'm not holding my breath for anything.
Dan, are you using a studio mic or your headphone mic? Had a whole discussion about this. This is the HyperX Procast microphone. The headphone mic, definitely not. This is the Bose earbuds 2. And it has a decent mic for earbuds, but it won't compare to this. This is a $250 studio mic, so yeah, way better. So also asking, can I show us a dog? I can't really move this camera to show my floor and all that. So my dog, if you go to my Twitter and scroll through the media, you'll see some photos of her. She's very cute. Oh, did you answer the Xbox controller for
Oh
Duo?
yeah, that was I was about to answer it. So
Yeah.
Microsoft is aware. I believe they're aware of that issue. It was a bug, I believe, and I think there
Yeah,
should
we
be
heard it was an issue, a bug with one of the libraries,
yeah.
and they pulled it to fix the library, and it'll be coming back, and it's supposedly it's going to be coming back soon.
Yeah,
so.
next month or next 2 months or so, I think. Will you present the Microsoft event live? No, we will not be doing a live commentary on the event. We will both be very busy covering the events for WindowsCentral.com. Dan will... Actually, I don't know. Never mind. Right, any more questions? If there are no questions, we will go, because it's Friday. And I want to start the weekend.
And I gotta go walk a dog, apparently. All right, girl, relax.
Last call for questions.
All right.
Thoughts on the Pixel launch? Really, no thoughts. It was a boring event. To be fair, okay, so I will say I really do like the design of the Pixels. I think they are very nice looking Android phones. But that's all I've got to say on the matter. Cameras are great, blah, 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 but I'm not interested, really. They're not phones for me.
They don't fold. I'm the same way. The only people that seem to really care about Pixels are those in the press who are going to get free Pixels. I'm going to still stick to that argument. They get a lot of press. A lot of people are interested in them. But it's just the media that seems to talk about them, and I don't really see normal people use them. Everybody uses a Samsung or an iPhone here in the United States, and I don't see that changing. But I don't know. But I mean, Google does cool stuff, right, with the photos and all that. But I don't know. Whatever.
A couple more questions. Two-part question. Now that Panos Panay has been captain for a while, how do you guys think he's doing a good job? And number two, have you met him? How is he face to face? I think he's doing a good job. I mean, I've been super, Windows 11 was the first time I've been excited about Windows in a long while. That was all him. Surface has always been quite exciting. The Duo stuff in the recent years has been great. I think he's doing a great job, and I think as long as he sticks around, I think Windows and Surface will be exciting topics. Regarding meeting him face to face, yeah, I think we've both met him face. Dan's had one-to-one briefings with him.
Yeah.
I've met him face to face once or twice, brief conversations, because he's always followed around by somebody who tells him not to say anything to anyone.
It's true. Yeah, no, I've talked to him quite a few times. He's very friendly. He's very sincere.
Very intense.
And he's very intense. He stares at you, and it's like you feel when you're talking to him, you have his full undivided attention. That like there's nothing else in the world that matters when you're talking to him at that moment.
Yeah.
He's a really sincere, genuine person, and he's fun to talk to. He's a. I think it would be cool to work for him in that sense, but yeah, he's got this kind of like father thing. But yeah, I don't know.
All right. Yeah. Next week's podcast will be on a Friday, not Thursday. We'll do it on Friday, normal time. All right. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next Friday for a special episode where we talk about all the new services. Until then, bye.
All right, Zach, I really got to go.